All right. So, email, as you guys probably know, is the main way people communicate in the workplace in the year 2024, which isn't to say that other communication methods aren't rising in importance. Obviously, since 2020, we've increasingly seen different kinds of messaging systems like Microsoft Teams and Slack becoming more important in official workplace contexts as opposed to just, text messaging people's private phone numbers. We've also seen, digitally mediated meetings like those in Teams or Zoom becoming important ways to communicate. But email is still at this point, king in a way. And it's really important to recognize that an email is a digital version of a memo. It is not simply a long text message. And that heritage of the email as a digital memo is something that'll make a little bit more sense when we look in a little while at memo format explicitly. And it kind of shows, why email's formatted the way it is and why it uses the style that it does. And a lot of the things that we talk about today vis-a-vis email will equally apply or largely apply when we talk about memos because they're essentially the digital and analog twins of one another. So emails in the workplace have certain features that they have to be considered fully functional. There are a couple things that your email client will auto-populate, right? The date will automatically go into your email from the computer, and your sender information will automatically auto-populate as well. But you need to provide the other parts. The most important part that you need to provide is the subject line. And a clear and specific subject line is a hallmark of a professional email message because it is a subject line that will help the reader of the message understand what action is required or identify the specific individual or situation that's involved, and it'll help that person from, a busy, crowded inbox where there are dozens of messages, that'll help them identify a particular message. So the subject line and importance of it cannot be stressed enough, really. An email does typically have a salutation, but whereas in a letter, the salutation had the very formulaic, dear honorific last name, like dear Mr. Smith or dear Ms. Sanchez, in a business email, there are more choices. And sometimes when there are more choices, there are more pitfalls, right? Is it, appropriate in a particular situation to be formal and to still address your email to Dear Mr. Smith? Or can you say, Hi, Susan? And a lot of that will depend on the nature of your pre-existing relationship with the person whom you're addressing, or if you've been going back and forth with someone in an email chain, what position is this message in the chain? Is it the first message? Is it the fourth message? So that can sometimes be a place for problems or stress, is understanding what's the best salutation to use. The body text of a business email, like that of a letter, is going to be organized into paragraphs, although in an email, those paragraphs are typically relatively short, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Business email often has some sort of closing, regards yours truly, something along those lines. Best, some people like. I don't really understand that one because I don't know best what. And a lot of workplace emails have a program signature block that you set up in your email software, and when you send the message, it puts it at the bottom of your email, and it is partly your signature in the sense that it gives your name, but it also might give your contact information and information about your business or organization. And so that's one thing that's different between a personal email and a workplace email, is that business emails do often have a signature block. So those are the components that we expect to see. In addition to that, it's important to think when you're addressing your email, because there's always the to line of your email, and you have to fill in that. thinking about who is the most appropriate recipient or who are the most appropriate recipients for your message. In the workplace, people can get a high volume of emails every day. So it's definitely important to be careful about selecting your recipients, not to spam too many people with a message. So if this is a message that only one person needs to get, that's fine, give it to them. But if a message has come down, say a group list, asking people to respond to an individual about an issue, respond to that individual. Don't respond to the whole list, right? Don't reply all. That's always embarrassing when people do that. But on the other hand, sometimes there are people you do want to keep in the loop that you want to CC. Maybe a supervisor or another relevant party would be someone you just kind of, they're not the recipient of the message, but you want to keep them in the loop. They have a need to know basis for the situation. So it's definitely important to bear that in mind as well. Other than that, there are, oh, actually, before I talk about this slide, I want to point you to a couple of resources in Canvas. So we don't have a lot of class time to meet together, so this is not something I would want to use our class time to look at. So in our week 4 activities here in Canvas, I have a couple of videos linked that I want to quickly recommend to you guys. The first video, How to Write a Professional Email, is kind of a workplace email 101. You know, if you have not really had the experience of needing to send emails in the workplace, this is a good one to orient you to the basic expectations of emails in the workplace. If you already have those kind of basics down, you've already been doing that a while, and you're looking for some sort of upping your game, go to this video, the 8 email etiquette tips, how to write better emails at work. So this assumes you already know the basics, but you're looking for ways to optimize your emailing to get better results, better responses from those whom you email. They're both relatively short videos, I mean, well under 10 minutes. So you can watch them both. And I'm just going to recommend these to you guys as something you might take a look at outside of class, since we don't really have extra time in class to look at these things. All right, so they're down here in the bottom of the week 4 activities folder. Now, if you do watch the first video, the one that's sort of more basic, it actually gives a lot of the same tips that I have on this slide, which I don't necessarily want to go through all of these, one by one in great detail, so I will just mention a couple of things here. I've already talked about the importance of a specific subject line, and I've alluded to the fact that emails, like letters and other documents, need to be organized into paragraphs. One thing that we often see in workplace emails as a general rule, and there can be exceptions, but as a general rule is the inclination to put the bottom line up front in an email, to get to the point first, and then after you've sort of given that point near the beginning of the message, add the supporting information behind that point. That's, like I say, it's not appropriate in every situation, as we'll discuss a little bit later, but more often than not, it is appropriate in the workplace setting, because that may be all the person needs to know is that bottom line, or at the very least, it helps orient them to the issue early on in the message. It's definitely a situation where you want to be employing professionalism in your choices of typeface, for instance, and your choices of wording and punctuation. I've often seen people who have habits that are more developed by text messaging struggle a little bit to remember, for example, to put a period at the end of every sentence, because a lot of people don't put periods at the end of sentences in text messaging, or that's seen to somehow be passive aggressive to do certain things like that. So we definitely want to still keep a workplace level of formality in our messages, even though they're going to be less formal in their tone than most letters. And another thing I think that is an underestimated factor of an effective workplace email relates to using design features. And what I mean by that is illustrated on this slide. So this image comes from the article that is linked here, but I think this article is actually defunct at this point. So I'm glad I saved this image because it's a great image. This shows the difference between receiving an email that is just boom, a paragraph plopped into an email, and receiving an email that uses document design features to organize the information and to highlight action items. And essentially the premise on this is, and we haven't really talked about document design yet, we'll talk about that a lot in our next class meeting, but when people are reading emails on mobile devices, which is increasingly the situation, even for people who are accessing workplace emails, they may be accessing that on a mobile device. It means that you're reading things faster and you're taking in information less effectively, oftentimes because there are more distractions around you as opposed to focusing on a large screen in front of you. As a result of that, it becomes even more important in your emails to think about presenting information so that the person receiving it can identify the action really readily. Obviously, a block of text that takes up most of the screen of your phone is not good. So you can see that's the before version, obviously. The after version shows information being chucked into short paragraphs. It shows use of boldface to bring out section headings, use of bullet points to list things that need to be included in a document. Making sure to stress things like action items or next steps so that those things sort of pop out to the user so that the user can more quickly do the thing that they're being asked to do in effect. You'll also notice a subject line that is more specific, which is by 310 list of IT needs, as opposed to just IT needs. When the subject line then includes, for example, the date by which the information is needed, helps the person who sees this in their inbox remember when they need to get this done and makes it more likely that they'll get it done by that date. It's usually the case in an email situation, you don't want any paragraph to be longer than 4 lines. And I don't mean 4 sentences, I mean 4 lines on the screen, which on a mobile device might just be 1 sentence. So it often means making things very much broken up into manageable, readable pieces of information. So like I say, we'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about document design, but it's helpful to be aware of this as we are talking about emails now. Okay, so with some of these things in mind, imagine that this is an email that a friend of yours says they've sent to you, let's say. This is an email that not very professional. I think we would probably all agree. So what are some things that someone would want to do to this message to make it more professional? It's obviously an extreme example.
Change the font.
The grammar.
Yeah, change the font. Yeah.
Change the salutation. Because it started
Yes.
with "Hey girl."
Hey girl is not appropriate. Even if this person is your friend, if you're emailing them in a workplace setting, hey girl's not good. What else?
Remove the emoji.
Probably so. Although, emojis are now like officially built into Outlook now, so they may be here to stay.
The spelling.
Yeah. So Caleb suggests get rid of I, you, and your, type with full words. Rice suggests remove slang. Sure. Don't use abbreviations like LMAO. Now you might be thinking, who would write LMAO in an email like this? And I can say I have not gotten LMAO, but I have gotten a lot of student emails that have LOL in them. which is not very professional, right? So, so that was all the low-hanging fruit. You guys, all your suggestions were correct. They were all absolutely correct, 100%. Anything else we might want to do to this that might be after we fixed all those things that we might do to up our game?
Maybe adding some paragraphs.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's Caleb also points that same point out. Even though this is short, it still would benefit from being opened up and not just one big wall of text. Any other ideas? I think we got most of the biggies. So this would be employing a lot of the things we talked about, right? Changing the font, changing the salutation, getting rid of all of the unprofessional misspellings and the emojis and whatnot. So this, and breaking it up into paragraphs. So this is divided things up into 2 paragraphs. Oh, I guess one thing I didn't mention about the previous version, there's a crap ton of exclamation points in here. And while I was somewhat exaggerating for effect, I've seen a lot of people send out emails that end every single sentence in an exclamation point. And I don't know about, maybe I'm just cynical. I am not that enthusiastic about my workplace emails that I need to have an exclamation point every sentence. So, can you use exclamation points? Yeah. Should you use them every sentence? No. Other things that I've got on this revised version are signature block, right? So even if you are known to this person, it's a lot easier for them to phone you back if your phone number's in your signature block. They can just pull their phone out and dial that number right up. Presumably, they probably have your email address because you emailed them. Maybe you don't. So it's definitely useful to have this information, even if you are on a friendly basis with this person. And the reality is the signature block stuff is something you program in your email, so it's not like you have to type it out every time, right? It just will automatically go there.